Sonic Team is well known for its efforts as Sega's main studio for producing the Sonic the Hedgehog titles. But when I replayed Feel the Magic and the Rub Rabbits, seeing their logo on the startup screens was surprising, if only for the fact that I hadn't really thought about their endeavors outside of the Sonic brand, if ever. These games remove themselves so far from Sonic in an effort to engage a more casual game audience, while also presenting themselves with the unique gameplay premise of telling a love story. The development team for Feel the Magic was comprised of former developers of a group known internally at Sega as UGA, or United Game Artists, tasked with primarily making rhythm or music-focused games, which resulted in the creation of Space Channel 5 among others. They eventually got absorbed into Sonic Team after the end of the Dreamcast, and apparently poor sales of their games. The stylish mod-inspired visuals and musical direction of Space Channel 5 translated into an eccentric, character-focused rhythm game. Feel the Magic pays homage in very small ways, taking inspiration from the same sources as Space Channel 5 did with its visuals, and even making the first part of the rhythm minigame the exact same pattern as Space Channel 5's tutorial. The one unifying thread among the former UGA developed games is that they don't take themselves too seriously. When you launch both DS games, you're greeted with a serious-looking, yet tongue-in-cheek warning message, and then immediately swept into a whirlwind of dancing, strange music, and sexual overtones. Feel the Magic and its successor, the Rub Rabbits, are not complex games, but they both explore a pretty complex social concept: falling in love. These games are structured unassumingly enough. A boy meets a girl, and through a series of mini-games, the story unfolds while outside forces bring them together. The benevolent force in Feel the Magic is known in the game as the super performance group, the Rub Rabbits, of which the prequel was named after. Their name works on a couple levels. One, to provide a context to distinguish its members from the protagonist in Feel the Magic, and two, well, rabbits will do what rabbits will do. This is a game about a love story after all. The titles for these games in different regions don't translate anywhere close to each other. Feel the Magic was localized in North America from I Would Die For You in Japanese, and then simply named Project Rub in Europe. The Rub Rabbits is an even further departure from its original Japanese title, Where Do Babies Come From? These are all evocative titles on purpose, but all come from a desire to translate romantic comedy genre conventions, perhaps more Japanese-specific ones, into gameplay. Silly music accompanies every minigame to make sure the tone stays consistent, and the a cappella tracks and sound effects are performative to the degree that suggests the Rub Rabbits have curated the events themselves. Feel the Magic even begins with their leader interjecting himself into the would-be couple's life. In terms of the visual design, the silhouetted characters require the player to fill in the gaps of imagination. The animations speak for themselves, and any superficial ideas of attraction don't really come into question. The minimal presentation and quirky animations of the characters seem like something you might get if you transform the silent films of Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin into gameplay scenarios. Story-wise, Feel the Magic meanders more in the early parts of the game to justify the different gameplay scenarios, fighting off a single suitor throughout the story, eventually resulting in the defeat of the main rival by the end. The Rub Rabbits uses those same outlandish gameplay justifications throughout, but the storyline is much more focused and complex, involving a rival for the girl instead of the guy, and much higher stakes involving multiple suitors and a race against time to save the girlfriend's memories. As products, the Rub Rabbits realizes some of the potential not afforded to Feel the Magic due to time constraints as a launch title, including shifted perspectives for certain minigames by rotating the DS, and local multiplayer options. Mechanically, the touchpad is inherent to both games' designs to such a degree that there's no other inputs allowed for them. Absolutely everything, including menu navigation, allows no input from the D-pad, shoulder buttons, or other buttons, with the exception of the start button to pause the gameplay, and the often underutilized internal microphone.
Hey! Hey!
This design decision was probably greatly informed by Feel the Magic's status as a launch title. When looking at the other launch titles, the majority of them were ports or franchises that had existed on other controller-centric platforms. There are some other considerations like the value added by portability and the extra content in these ports. But Feel the Magic was a game that could have only existed on the DS, making its value distinct among the other launch titles. Initially, you might think building a game with only the touchpad is too limiting, but it's quite the opposite. The first challenge in Feel the Magic involves giving a man a sort of Heimlich maneuver to push fish out of his stomach. Some are more simplistic, where it's only necessary for the player to rapidly tap the screen on some rampaging bulls. Others take the feel and touch themes and run with it. How else would you control a game about feeling for lost items in the sand? And of course, as these games are centered around a romance, touch is almost necessary. In some specific minigames, the participation can be very intense and intimate, such as confessing your love, and even holding hands. Casual games of this nature tend to get a bad rap for being overly simplistic. You'd be right to say that Feel the Magic and the Rub Rabbits are not complex games, but it's not the simplicity that's the hook. It's the level of engagement you have with the action. The result of having the touchpad puts you in the protagonist's shoes more directly than if you were to navigate or control the game with your typical inputs. You're provided a more subjective control of the action. This might be obvious, but in the context of a romance game, it's really rare. Compare this with a game that might have you select more objective parameters, like a series of dialogue options. Through the touchpad, you're always physically connected to the protagonist in some way. From every snowball tossed, to every tightrope traversed with a unicycle, and every giant snake's digestive tract, you're an active participant in the danger and sacrifice of the protagonist. The tension is heightened whenever you need to thread the needle on a tightrope by yourself. Tending to your partner's wounds yourself is infinitely more impactful than just seeing or reading it happening. In so many words, you're literally and figuratively connected to the gameplay. Based on the impression you get from Feel the Magic's cover art and both games' startup animations, you're probably wondering when I'll get talking about the good stuff. Well, this isn't the right video for that because there simply isn't that much to say about it. The director of both games, Takumi Yoshinaga, mentioned in an interview that it was difficult to create a theme based around love. The easiest way to communicate the relationship between men and women is to throw in some sexual content. His comment was in relation to the challenge of how far to go with the fan service. In the same interview, he goes on to mention that the women on the development team helped him to reel that aspect back, which goes to show how seriously they took the development of the game, and how much care was put into making sure that the game didn't lose its focus. Any fan service that the game does provide is minimal, relegated to dressing up the love interest in various outfits, unlocked with points earned from the minigames. Chosen outfits can be seen in the breaks between rounds, but aside from that, unlocking outfits don't really provide much titillation. As I mentioned before, the character models leave a lot to the imagination, and costumes are carefully designed so that players would never feel like a creep to play this game in public, in an effort to make it more accessible. That lack of fan service leaves players to engage with the game's essential linchpin, a love story. Generally speaking, a love story always results in a union between people. In less explicit terms, the goals behind romance narratives typically celebrate two people coming together to create something more than they can individually. The games nail this down well enough, and don't kid themselves with their premise. The guy getting the girl is a foregone conclusion. But how we get there is what really sets them apart. When you complete the story, the games leave you with a simple phrase: rub is love. The more pedantic explanation behind this is that rub and love are pronounced in a similar fashion in Japanese. When the voices cheer you on to rub it at the start of every game, you wouldn't be wrong if you heard love it instead, or vice versa. Often the hardest part of romance is the connection. How do you connect with someone? In the context of the games in question, how do you truly touch someone? There really is no one correct answer. But I like to think that the phrase, and by extension the games themselves, are trying to suggest that a good way to do that is to connect through shared experiences. The story and gameplay of both games all come back around to the theme of touch. There's no shortage of games that have love stories at their center, but few games tackle romance quite like Feel the Magic and the Rub Rabbits. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I had a lot of fun coming back to these games. Games like these are too interesting to miss. So if you've played them, let me know what you think of them in the comments. Sharing my videos is a great way to help my channel grow, so if you know someone who won't stop talking about these games, send them my way. Or just share it with somebody you love. Anyway, see you soon.